start.
The following interview was conducted with Gerry and Joe Scardo as part of the Clinch Coalition's 25th Anniversary Oral History Project. The interview team includes Garrett Wall, Sarah Lee, and Fio and Janiku. The interview took place at the University of Virginia's College at Wise on November 13th, 2021. So, Gerry.
Want me to talk some about the history of activism?
Well,
or what's your question? What's your question?
Well, we will get to there, but a little about you first. Could you tell us where you're from?
The Blue Ridge Mountains, where the Skyline Drive runs, and it's Meadows of Dan. I come from the Mayberry section, and if you ever heard Andy Griffith say Mayberry, in fact, they got the name from our community. At one time, they had the post office that was Mayberry until 1872 to 1922. The part we lived in was officially Mayberry.
So, you were speaking a little bit about your father. Could you tell me about your parents and how they came to be around here?
Over in that area, over in the Blue Ridge, my mother's people were farmers, and she actually taught school riding side saddle horse. She had a little bit of college, but it was only a matter of maybe a summer or two, and you could be a teacher. Once you got married or had children, you couldn't teach anymore in the state of Virginia. And my dad had a real bad accident when he was about 27 years old, 28, broke his back, but he was able to run a small store. His dad, for many years, both of them ran it together, but my dad got a farm. In fact, we had 2 small farms. We weren't successful in the way of making a lot of money, but if you raise food for a dozen people and a few neighbors and a little bit to sell without tractors and things, that's right. So that's what my dad did.
You
There were 12 children in their family.
He raised a crop of good kids. That's what he raised.
12 children in one family. That's a lot.
10 of them to adults. Some of them were lost to whooping cough, and one had appendicitis. A very tiny child, but
I'm sorry that happened to them.
yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about your educational background?
I guess the biggest thing is I went to Berea College, and I could do really pretty well. And I majored in biology and minored in German, and worked my way through school because I had no money. Was a half-day student for 2 years, and
What's that?
you work half the time and take half the load, basically. But I came out of there in 4 years, had more credits than most people. And some of the jobs I did working were Boone Tavern, which it wasn't really a drinking tavern, it was food, wonderful food. And biology lab, and then grading papers for the nursing class and different classes.
This working she's talking about.
Yeah.
Berea College didn't charge tuition, but students worked to pay them everything. So I've been a waitress first for the college, for Boone Tavern Hotel.
And then after college, I went to graduate school, but they wouldn't let me go into my colleges, so I sort of quit and went into the WAC, Women's Army Corps. And talk about education there. You sit through 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. We got a lot of things taught to us, and those people teaching had master's degree, and some of them been to war college. They'd been in World War II.
She did what a lot of young men do nowadays. If they can't find a job, they join the Army.
Yeah.
She's out of money, so she joined the Army.
Yeah.
That is a story that resonates pretty deep. It was a toss up for me between the Army or school. why biology?
Oh, we like science. My family is pretty much science lovers. And everybody, when they're young, wants to know what's the key to life. And when you come out of biology, you know this is fragile. And all these systems are fragile. That's basically, I think, what you learn. But since I was young, when I was young, you didn't have medicine for blood pressure to speak of. People be dying of that. You think where we are now? Yeah.
It's a very different world.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
So this fascination with the systems, the fragile systems of the world, is that a big part of why you got into the Clinch Coalition and environmental activism?
We had been fighting rolling battles years before Clint did, and I can tell you about some of those things that we were into. But clean air, clean water, you just don't have it unless somebody has worked for it. And let me borrow this book. I'm going to give y'all some books. I was pretty well aware of about how bad the food was at the turn of the century. And this is pretty easy to read. And also, when I was young, and each one of y'all can just take a pick of these books. Rachel Carson, about the time I was in college, this was one of the most, this moved the country almost more than anything. When she wrote about the DDT, and it stays, and it builds up, and you would lose your bird populations and stuff. My dad didn't have this kind of education, but he knew not to spray with DDT. He had the idea, you're spraying your own nest. You're fouling your own nest when you're spraying poisons into it. And of course the water and stuff like that. So this was a remarkable book, and I say the environment was more in people's minds in the 70s than now, right much. In some people's mind. Some people's got it, and some just, you know. Talking about the rolling battles, I guess that when we went to, there was this landfill stuff, if y'all can imagine. Garbage became quite a problem. And some of the coal miners that had wealth, coal operators, I should say, had wealth in Wise County, was going to put in a commercial landfill. And you know, we got rails, so you know how much it could bring in. And it would go into our Flanagan Dam. Our Flanagan Dam is the water source of 37,000 people in maybe 4 counties. We don't have much water because the coal took everybody's individual water. So Wise County, with these educated people, could use the newspaper and do that thing. When I came over, there was a big speech. I had on a Greenpeace shirt. Stand up, make a big speech, write a letter in the paper, which I gave you that. And the editor says, let's run it in another paper, which we did. And those coal operators decided to go somewhere else. They went in Allegheny County, and when I read about it later, $1 billion worth of damage to the water aquifers up there. So that was one battle. And then there was another group in our county that wanted a landfill in our county. And because I knew how to organize and had seen some of this other stuff, I helped them. And of course, it took different ones. I'm not saying I'm the credit, but on organization, I probably am. And they beat it off. And there was a big proposal on toxic sludge, which in fact, had maybe Virginia Tech behind it and different things behind it. And you got all this vast land that you could throw sludge on. Well, I had a book, and the outside cover said, toxic sludge is good for you. So you make a copy of that, and you start working, you know, and you start educating. And there was a Darlene Wilson who would ask him, well, this is stage 1. What's stage 2? What's stage 3? And when they really got the picture, this was finally turned off. Another thing was Buchanan County, our county, and probably another county or two were thinking about bundling up the garbage and trash and all that and burying it in a certain way, but they was looking at our county. So I figured that'd take some of the water again. So I got a copy of the proposal, the big old notebook-like thing. I run the cost on it, and I had the cost checked by an engineer, and he said I was right. So I take off work in a way a lot of people never take off anything. I had my red dress on. I went to the supervisors meeting in Grundy, and I got up, showed them the cost. They hadn't read the book, but they were going to vote on it that morning. So it went down right then, and I'm sure I offended the Thompson and Lytton engineers. I offended them pretty bad, but we didn't get that, and I'm sorry to say some other place probably got our garbage. You know, I really, anyway, I don't know when you guys, I think you guys weren't even born when there was a hole in the ozone and it was growing and growing. And I'd stay up nights writing letters. That was before computers. I wrote over 500 letters and mailed them as all of Congress and all of our people in Richmond that I could get a hold, or you know.
Well, I want to thank you for that one.
I did work hard on it, and I'd go to work next day, and I had children, and I don't get tired. A lot of people can't do anything because they're too tired, but college teaches you to go through stress and extend yourself, and the same thing about military service. You can do it. You might not can do it forever, but for a while you can do quite a lot. On the cleanup, a volunteer litter coordinator for our county. We did some beautiful things cleaning up our reservoir, and it would be give the Bass Club some money to get the boats out, and they would help transport us in the trash, and they would work too, and the Corps would work. And everything had been washing in because we had these dumpsters by the streams and everything. But they moved those, and for a number of years it was you could salute it. It was so beautiful. And one time Lynn Wisco, this way, was going to burn trash. And I probably didn't have a copier or a printer or anything, but I had some material, and I had addresses of all them on the board. So I tore out this page and that page and I mailed it. And what it is when you burn plastic, you make dioxins like Agent Orange type, which you can never destroy unless there's a real elaborate way to do it. But body tissue loves that stuff. It gets in the fat of a grasshopper. It gets into you, and furans are pretty dangerous. So never did after I mailed that hear anymore about that plant. And I'm glad, and I can't say it changed their minds or what happened, but I tried. You know, I thought of something to do. Climate change, I worked on that quite a bit, but I could not get anywhere with it because of the Koch brothers' disinformation, and they allied up with billionaires, and it's called Jane Mayer's, M-A-Y-E-R. Book Dark Money sort of explains it very well, and I probably wasn't so aware of how much, but it's like the cigarette people. They knew how bad the nicotine was and the smoking, but they hid it and all that. Well, the same thing about this global warming. It was really known pretty far back. It's basic. It's sort of basic science. But you can sow doubt, and disinformation. And so our country never got, and politicize it and whatever else, and our country never made progress.
Politicizing something's pretty much the death of any movement on it.
Yeah. And I sort of laid back for a number of years after that because I wasn't making any progress. My brother had been to the Antarctic, and we knew how frozen that work was. He was in the Antarctic with a deep freeze expedition. About 1955.
How'd you get there?
56. Ships.
In the Navy.
Navy. Yeah, it was a Navy operation. And he brought back the beautiful pictures before Walt Disney ever got a hold of them. And we could see, frozen, but it's quite a thaw going on the ice shelves and things. So anyway, that's some of the things I did before. No, there was another thing. Steve and I were in a coalition for jobs and environment. Was in that for 10 years. And one thing that group did, there was a coal slurry, Long Mountain coal slurry spill. And our group had to stand in. We had a few $100, like 600, 800. We knew a lawyer, and the coal slurry was spilled into the Clinch River onto those endangered mussels that a lot of them had just been put back, bred and grown and put back in there. So they had to go and dive and try to rescue what they could of those. You have to put on them, and you have to know where they are. So that group, I think the amount that group won was $2.2 million, and it went to clean up the Clinch and for employment and clean up of St. Charles. And Sister Beth Davis, very key to that. And that organization, and that we had some, and I would go after work, I'd go to Kingsport, come back home about 11:30 at night. So, and somebody said that their life was just like people like me. Their life was just like mine. And I didn't think about it before, but no. There's golfing and boating all weekend, and we're at these meetings and trainings and blah, blah, blah. And like I've just told you, some of my secret life, that very few people know that. And until Tanya said something about, well, you ought to write a history. I just moving into the future, not thinking about, back there. So. And this is a really great book. Great read. And then Upton Sinclair, I didn't even know he wrote 100 books. So this is about early coal. Have y'all ever heard of the Clinchfield Coal Company? That was what was in our county primarily, and a little bit over in Russell County. And my grandmother, we'd go to Hillsville to the dentist or something. She looked at the big house. She said, always remember your kin to Carter, or whatever his name was. And he was the president, actually, of the Clinchfield. He was kin to the Barnard line. And I had no idea of that, how that connected to, I just happened to move into the county. It's connected. George Lafayette Carter. So.
Sounds like you've been active with very few regrets for a good long while.
Yeah. Well, yeah, ages. Yeah. I'm looking for replacements. We're trying to
Well, that makes a good bit of sense, because you've been with the Clinch Coalition since its founding, haven't you? For 25 years.
And I'll be 80, and the same thing with Kiwanis Club, aging group. Same thing with our Methodist Church, aging group, and we don't know really,
So tell me a bit about the coalition and its origins. Yeah.
Well, I do remember the flood over there and how bad that was, and we saw how washed out it was. And I've always been against bad forestry practices like clear cutting. It doesn't make sense to operate timber. I mean, you do logging and things like that. Selective cutting and, so on. New Zealand's very particular about their forest. And we said that it was the headwaters. We had to keep the headwaters clean. The forest is really what keeps your water fresh and clean. So we talk about that a lot. And I generally just want the national forest to be national forest, for the animals and people. And and not, other people can grow the timber, you know.
There are other places where that can be done.
There,
doesn't it?
yeah, we need to move into that. We should have moved into that a long time ago. It's precious stuff, you know. And my dad, I didn't even know he operated a sawmill and did work with timber until I was probably 60 years old. And then he would do that. And then later, when he was about 55, he had about 15 acres of land, and he cut the timber off of it, but he had boys to go out and measure and estimate. He built a barn, he sold some. He built a barn that's white oak, sold some of that stuff. We had good fencing. He had enough money to buy a truck, you know, things like that. So it is valuable.
It is. It is a very profitable industry. It's just damaging when done incorrectly, because once something's gone, it's gone. You can't get it back.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that leads into what I have as the first major project of the coalition, the High Knob Bark Camp sale.
Mm-hmm. We'd go out and look at it and talk about it and argue back and forth. We had some really good help. Biologist, a lawyer, you know, we've had some really good help. Young people in that helped us get through. And SELC, you know, Southern Environmental Law Center, if we didn't have them to appeal, sometimes to formulate some, I don't think you'd get too far, you know. But we tried to reduce the amount of timbering. I mean, we'll say no timbering and all that, but you're happy if you can mitigate and save some of the old growth and, you know, things like that.
It seems you did. You managed to cut that plan in half, right?
I'd say. And it might deter them from trying, you know, for a little while. But right now, they got a pretty good, they got some big cuts planned, but part of our goal too is to educate people and work with them in several ways. And we've done a lot of work on, at times, on water quality and stuff in the streams. And then there was the hemlocks were dying of the woolly adelgids. They still are dying of it, but me and Joe got so much training on that we bought the bugs that eat them. We've chemically treated trees and several things, and we've saved hemlocks. It costs. We have some around an old house. It costs us thousands to cut them because they're huge. And then we saw down at Big Stone some of the most magnificent trees I've ever seen, and I'm sure they're gone. There were hemlocks, but they would remind you of being in California, some of those really big trees. It was that beautiful. And so sometimes our government doesn't have the funds. These national forests, the foresters don't have the funds that they need to keep the campsites, the bathrooms, and all that going, but Senator Warner got a bill through, and there's lots more money, including like on the Blue Ridge Parkway. They couldn't keep it trimmed, cleaned up like they used to, but now there's money, so it's improved.
So you're looking to retire a bit, huh? Looking to retire soon? Hoping for
I retired about 2 years ago, right before the COVID, the fall, the late fall, or in the fall before COVID. So.
You taking this time to try and focus on educating the people coming after you to do what you've done?
I've been writing letters. I'll give you one. It's in the recent paper, and it's on Thanksgiving, but it is a message about global warming in there too, so it works both ways, or 2 or 3 ways. So I'll give this to y'all. I've written many letters over the years. it'll have some about high temperatures and crop loss and so on. But in October, I worked on a message that went to the UN, and we had to do a video and stuff like that, and it wasn't really a speech, it's more like a text, and delivering the text-like stuff is far different from a speech. And I had about 4 minutes, and we had to edit and work back and forth a lot, but it was on climate change, and they said they liked it and everything, and I don't know how many people in really watch it, but when the Clinch Coalition annual newsletter comes out, it'll probably have that link. They can watch it. That's really what I'm doing at this point, is trying to work on that. I'll tell you what, we're talking about seasons, and then my neighbor says we just got too hot and cold. We basically lost this beautiful Appalachian spring, which I'll write about in your studies. It was a slow and gradual warming. Not this too hot, too early, then back and forth. And the other day, like in the fall, I saw frog hopping. Just the other day. When I was young, you never saw frogs out of season. They're using up their resources. And then we've got the insect population at my house has crashed. And in that, I have a biology major. On the graduate record exam, I made the top of those that took it that year. This is me. This is called, I guess I got it on something else. In that red folder, you'll have a picture of me. I'm blazing the trail, where it means I'm marking the trail. And Joe and I worked a heck of a lot on that Benji trail. And he could put in steps and do major, structures. Is that on the very back? Okay, yeah, I wanted that too. So we would go out and paint, for miles at a time, So people don't get lost. People could get lost, and you don't want them lost. I don't exactly know where y'all want me to go next on this, but Boucher was wonderful. He'd go out in the woods with us, big old woods. We'd go up Pine Mountain up on that and look at some old growth like I've never seen almost. And I've been to Joyce Kilmer too, but there's some really outstanding things there. We would have got a national recreation area, but Scott County supervisors just went crazy. It was on TV, and I thought there was a fight or something going on. I think after they defeated it pretty much, they looked back and regretted, in a way, because they didn't get their good roads. It could have meant millions to them. But they made up their minds before they really, got into it. On these other groups, I was part of the Virginia Forest Watch. I was as key to it as just about anybody. I knew a neighbor, and that neighbor was really generous, and she gave that Forest Watch $10,000 early on. Later, she gives me and Joe Kittle Holler, which is 59 acres, a log cabin, 1840, in a old red cottage. It's not, but she was generous, and she had a little thing, needlework, something like, if you see something that you can do today, kindness, do it. It's more or less, she would help animals, they're in pounds and things like that. And one time she saw a dog by the road that was hurt, and she got that dog surgery and kept it. that's expensive. The Earth First really helped us get publicity in the area and in the paper on some of those efforts we were making to stop the cutting. And biggest success or whatever, it's hard to sort out, but our group lasting more than 10 years, most groups fail in about 10 years, about as long as they run. Arthur Smith, he worked at Eastman, he helped establish 10 environmental groups. I don't think ours is exactly one of them, but it was established about that time. And most of those are gone. They would run, several years, and then they would just not hold together. Steve Brooks is sort of a glue and organizer, and he knows the people and the talent that's around, and he's helped really keep that going. And he and his wife Maxine would, in the summers, until a very few years ago, have a garden party. And you would meet everybody you knew, and then you'd meet some more, and you'd have the best, it was potluck, you'd have the best food and tea in the world. And it was just pure fun. It'd be like all afternoon or something, And maybe you could run it into the evening, but that helps too, making friends. And I would say that my life is much richer because of, being in this. I would have never met these people anywhere else. And that I wanted to mention Diane Withen. And y'all know the big power plant over at St. Paul. And there was some opposition to that, but one thing that was key, and I don't know the measurements, but you know how poisonous mercury is. And when you burn coal, it goes down. Like a teaspoon will poison a huge lake. She got them to knock it from like this, 1/10, Diane, with 1/10 of what it would have been.
What'd you say? I missed something. What'd you say Diane did?
She helped keep the amount of mercury being emitted way down. Yeah.
Did that do the Clinch Coalition? How'd you do it?
A great effort. It's a great personal effort to battle the battles I've battled, or the battles she's battled, or to stand up and talk.
Was it through the Clinch Coalition?
It's on her own. A lot of that's pretty much on her own, or with a different group. And she had the idea, I think, of the art and essays, and I would grade some of the essays, or most of them, and the group would do the art grade. Boy, we saw good stuff, and young people writing at a level which is just absolutely beautiful, and I appreciated being part of that. And some of them did the complete thing. They had the art, and then they had the essay on the backside. And music too. It's nice.
Well, it's good to know there's some overachievers out there who still care.
Yeah, they're going to go places. You could just about tell it that they. On that high knob rally we've done I haven't been the one doing the work, but we've been virtual, and that's done pretty well. And I'll tell y'all a story that's just for y'all. They had a Tesla up there. The last meeting they had, or last rally they had, that was in person on High Knob, they had a Tesla, and David, and his last name's a little hard to say.
And a what?
Tesla, a car. And
again.
A Tesla car.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't buy a car.
Electric car.
Yeah, electric car. I couldn't buy a car, but I went home and I said, well, maybe I'll buy some stocks. And that stock split. Every one of them, I had 5. Every one split to 5. And last week, every one of those was worth over 1,000. But I gave it to my grandkids already. But so part of me is thinking, what investments? So we're going to get solar at our house. It won't be great because we got a lot of trees, but I can do solar for my son. He says he can get 87%. And it's like you give them your inheritance or their inheritance now rather than waiting, you know. So we got a used hybrid car. Anyway, I'm trying to think how to cut our own. I mean, I go and talk about it, but you gotta do it. And
So every little helps, kind of.
yeah, my brother's planted. It's years ago. He's took farmland, and on his own money, he could have got the forestry people to plant it, but he did about, I'm going to say 60 acres easy of trees, and that's converting wonderful rolly into trees, and that's his effort. You know, everybody, even if they plant a few trees or let some trees grow or something, that can help a lot.
Not everyone has to jump into an organization or write letters to their congressman, but
think of what they can do.
But you went the extra mile. You did that.
Well, the miles we're going to have to make is quite fast. It's like Greta Thunberg said. She's on it. We don't have the time. I guess I just said we had 2 seasons now. It is remarkably warm at night, and but we can do it if we all want to. I mean, if we all decide we can work together, it's got to be everybody in the capacity that they have. Some can't do this, but they can do that, you know. The poor people weren't the ones that got us into this, so, you know, we can't say the blame's equal. Solar, I'm really glad to hear they're going to have enough solar put on Red Onion Mountain. Did y'all hear about that? It can power 12,500 houses. And it'll be online by about 2024, 2025, along in there. So that is huge because the number of households, like in our county, might be just 4,000 or so. We only have about 14,000. I'm thinking generally a household has 2 or 3 people, but, you know. So that's major. And this guy that had the Tesla, he's got a video that you can find it through the Clinch Coalition.org, and he tells you something about solar around the world, where some of these things are now equaling nuclear plants, and how many have that capacity like a nuclear plant. And it's coming along really pretty rapidly, so we could, you know. And I guess the other idea is that I have is an ocean corps where you actually take some of your Navy, your Seabees, you organize it probably under the UN and get different countries, and you start working on projects to clean up the ocean. You may take some islands, you know, and then do that. And some countries have trash that's just going into the river and flowing out in the oceans, and they could help with some landfills or, you know, just some things. But there's just so much stuff out there that we could do that I won't even name it all because everybody's probably got some ideas.
Sure. But, I mean, it's the fight of my generation.
No, it's the fight that belongs to us.
You started it.
You guys can help. But by dabs, it's on us. Yeah.
So, how would you go about getting us into it? How would you go about bringing the young people into care? The literature?
If you're well educated, you won't. If you were educated very much. But okay, here's a book. A Life on Our Planet by David Attenborough. There's some other books on global warming, but his is one of the best and very easy to read. And when you realize the insect population is crashing, the Amazon forest is no longer a carbon sink. The tundra is burning, and there's your carbon sinks there going. When you realize all that, you couldn't but, not help. You want, well, I've got family that's not gonna help folks. One time I brought some books on dirty air or something, He looked at, we don't read that stuff. And they never engage, and said they would be glad when Alaska was warm, heated up. But some of these places are heating up faster than you could ever imagine. And the Inuits and, the Eskimos, those people are seeing their livelihood going. And the salmon, that population in California is pretty endangered. There's 3 types of them there. And I always like fish and that kind of food, So there's just so much at stake. And we can do things. Electric vehicles will be a big boost. Solar will be a big boost. Our agriculture practices can be greatly improved. There's just many, many things. And I hope y'all enjoy some of those. I really think sometimes people will engage if they just know how, and I'm always hopeful. If you ask me, I'll never tell you it won't. That it's too late. I would never say something like that. And what I say, we gotta do what we can and what we must do. The rails will help as the government's gonna get more railroads, get some of this traffic off the road. And make us roads safer if we can get some of the trucking off like Interstate 81. So, y'all have some questions.
Do you two have any questions?
Yes, you get young people involved.
I did try. That's part of the letter
I
writing.
missed that, you don't.
Yeah. Part of the letter writing, part of, Wise County has 3 strong environmental groups, which is remarkable. A county is really lucky if they have one. That's good.
I can't necessarily think of any good strong environment groups
Sam's,
in my city where I'm from.
from where?
In my city where I'm from, Salem.
Probably I can't either.
I can't.
Although yeah,
What do you say about Sam's?
Sam's is a good club. Yeah, it's a good group.
Who are they?
They're down at Big Stone
What's it came from? What's that Sam's mean?
Southern Appalachian Mountain Stewards, and they won some big things on selenium going into from a mining thing. It was on NPR. It was several years ago, and they organize things in the community too. So, but Sharon, that's the president of her, and the other presidents have been very talented, but she can drive 6 stagecoaches at one time. She's watching a lot of stuff and coordinate on a lot of stuff, able to do far beyond what I could have done. It's what I would do sometimes is stand up and talk and speak, and some people can't do that because of their jobs, or they feel like they can't, this, that, and the other. So, have I wore y'all out?
No. It's been inspiring is what it's been.
Well, Dick Austin, when he was one of our first, and one group worked with him. He'd get these marvelous posters designed. Wow, just wonderful stuff. And I didn't even know all about his background, but Sharon Fisher did know him. They both came out of West Virginia and stuff like that. And I'd say one other thing, this area has been blessed to have sisters, the Catholic, like Beth Davis, over in Lee County. Do y'all know about Dope Sick, that book? Lee County, they take a court case, and they know the attorney general that could take it. And in Abington, they win. And they won about 630 million and maybe a little bit more. In Oklahoma, the whole state come up with about that much. That's a whole state. And in modern times, it's not good work. It's not compared to, ours. And then what happened with the money, it didn't flow back to the rehabs and stuff like that. They actually had a long-term rehab center called the New Beginnings over in Lee County. A nursing home had been given to them, and they couldn't get this state to give them $1 million or two when they needed it, so it didn't stay. It's hard to keep something running and running. But anyway, the way I understand it, that settlement went back into Medicaid and things like that. It's just distributed some way. When I think those people that won it probably should have got a check.
The opium epidemic, the coal slurry stuff, all the clear cutting, it's all just greed, right? It's just people trying to make money.
Greed, and I'll tell you something. I don't know if it belongs in this film, but the other night we was at a meeting, and the nurse, she works at the prison system. I'm thinking at Red Onion, but she's worked in home health, and she's worked ER at Norton. And she's just said, we got on the subject, Dope Sick. She said when she worked ER, she was bagging a body a night at Norton. She said one of the worst was, that got her most, was a coal miner had fell over into his food at supper, I guess, needle in his arm. And that they bagged him with a needle even, Well, of course, if I was bagging somebody, I probably wouldn't have touched the stuff. Yeah, I just think if people have purpose, that they don't get into this temptations and things like that, because when I grew up, although you had some alcohol, you never had people going to prison. You never had the suicides. And we got right much suicides going on in our county. I don't know if it's let up any, but it's been very significant. And we never gave up hope. We was poor. We had our farm, we had our land, but we didn't have cash and money and that kind of stuff. And two of my brothers, one of them went to the Naval Academy, and he made a lieutenant colonel, and he retired, and he set up a company. It was very successful. My other brother had a high school education and went to the Antarctic. He got to be a lieutenant commander just on high school, but he could get along and he could do things, and then he comes out and he gets a job as commissioner of revenue. But I go back on him. When he was in Vietnam, he won the award for having the best company over there. He had the CBs and had the equipment, and he said he worked them in 2 shifts, so none of them got in any trouble. And then they'd win that big award. So, and that's part of how he got to be an officer, was he ran that company so well. Is there anything else y'all can think of?
If you could give me a fresh mission statement for the Clinch Coalition or for the environmental campaign, what would you say?
Well, this is sort of on the side of your question. I realize as I got much older that it's in politics rather than in environmental work that you really make the changes and control the stuff. And if I were young and maybe a man or something, go into politics, be a champion for the environment, be a champion on this climate change stuff. And honestly, I was always good in history. I didn't miss no questions on my exam there either. But, I was read and study, you know, that's how I did it. I didn't know all this stuff. But, that's my view of it, and that's my recommendation to young people, is you don't have to exactly be a lawyer, but politics is so important. And I don't mean it just because it's what this time we're in with Trump and all. I saw this before that's where it's really at. And New Zealand, we got to go to New Zealand, and with the state, it is wonderfully run. And they made a couple of decisions. They didn't want the cheap goods and stuff like that. So people get a good wage. Their products buy cost money, like your living room suit's gonna cost you. But everybody's got the good wage. And it's a wonderful, like they've got this zero waste areas, you know, like litter and trash, and there's just nothing like that. It's all recycled. Back when we went in 2004, and with the COVID, you could see them having better luck by far than our country. So, but our country, what happened with the manufacturing and all that stuff, it was going out of here in the 80s, and we didn't really realize it. In the 90s, we make these agreements, but all that money and all that stuff had moved the manufacturing away. And I come from an area where everybody had textiles, elastic plant, or furniture like Bassett, you know, and Vaughn, and those big fine names. And that really has hurt. And it hurt our county here. Our Dixon County had 300 to 500 women employed, which has helped their kids go to school. They didn't make a big amount of money, but it kept the household, you know, quite a bit. And they held on as long as they could, but that folded. So I'm all in favor of some of this stuff, like the insulin and medicines being made in our country by and large. But it's not, it's made overseas. And again, our country never controlled any of that.
Well, anything else that you'd like to add before we wind it up?
I've talked so my voice, as I'm getting older, is not very pretty. Sorry, yours is good.
Thank you.
I learned enough. I learned enough to go into another organization, take their platform, get it redone, get their bylaws updated, and also they were running on $200 or $300 as a basic balance, and now, and other people helped. I'm not saying I really did this myself, but you get it moving, and their budgets or balance stays over 1,000 easy, 1,700, and plus they're doing stuff with spending some of that money. So, I'm a professional sitter. I can sit and watch, and y'all are too, because you're students. You have to really. Sometimes it's endurance, but I learned a lot being in the organizations. I learn a little bit every time I'm on Zoom or something. And when I went to Berea, Berea College, I thought they'd go solar, so I was asking about it. And you know what? They put a hydro whatever plant on the Kentucky River, and half their campus is now running off of hydroelectric, and they're going to put another thing in the Kentucky River, and there'll be 100%, hydroelectric. So that answered that pretty quick, because I'd only thought about it this year, telling them, well, you got all that money, you could invest, and in fact they were already on, and they beat Notre Dame. They're proud. Notre Dame must have been putting in some too, so they beat it just a little bit.
Had to beat sports.
On sport, no, I'm getting the hydroelectric, getting, out of fossil fuel. Yeah, you're getting out of fossil fuel. So, that was a happy note this year.
Well, I wanted to thank you both for your time and
Well,
all your effort over these years.
thank y'all for your time.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. And, I'm glad they're gonna archive some of this stuff. And let me know if you like the books. I gave out a lot of those at David Attenborough books. I gave out, I'm gonna say about 20 of them. And everybody read that one. Sometimes you give out a book and people, half of them comprehend and half don't. And that Dark Money was some that, you know what? Garrett and Sarah, I can walk by somebody and tell if they're reading. Yeah. It makes them more lively. Or they'll comment, they'll make a little comment about the book or anything, you know, something like that. Well, it's been a pleasure to,
Absolutely.
I've never been in this building. And this sounds prideful, but Betty Gillum, the art teacher, y'all know about her, she's deceased now. We had art contests over there in Clintwood. I won the first 3 times. I've never sold a painting, but one of them was stolen. It was like a full figure of my Aunt Della and a horse, sort of in blues and purples and, you know, certain effects. Somebody robbed their old house. Nobody lived there, but somebody, the Eppersons had fortune. They took $200,000 worth of their antiques. Ours are just nothing but little things. And they took some good paintings, my aunt's paintings and clocks and certain things. And my second cousin was a sheriff, but he had investigators that were good, and we had pictures. And they solved the case. They got a glimpse of something down in Martinsville that matched the pictures. It was at somebody's buying up his stuff. And the flyer said that they were gonna sell that stuff up in Philadelphia. They had they robbed 5 houses and had about $300,000 worth of stuff in one of the tractor trailer, you know, up there. And they solved it just a week or 2 before the 4th of July when they were gonna have it up there selling it. And it was the diligent work of the investigators. And then they brought it back to our house and just everything, you know, it was very nice. We got 85% of what we lost back. So, and the guy that had the place in Martinsville had to testify or he would be jailed. Yeah. Well,